Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Ventus, and this is another episode of Agent Overview. On this episode, I'm going to talk about Banks. So, Banks is the fourth agent that you get, and she's actually one of the best agents in the game. Whether it's the early game, the mid game, or the late game, she will have some use. She will be of some use to your team, and she's just overall a really great agent. Now, this only applies to her on-file version. The archive version of Banks, she's still pretty good in the early game and the mid game, but in the late game she kind of starts falling off because she doesn't have an augment. But that's not really a big problem because she's going to help you reach that mid game, late game point where you have so much money, and well, we'll get to that in a bit when we actually talk about her starting items and how she functions. But first of all, let's just talk about her general strengths and weaknesses, starting with her stats. She's going to start off with 2 Anarchy. She's one of the 3 agents in the game at the moment, in this version of the game, with more than 2 Anarchy, and this is actually very useful. I think that Anarchy is probably the best stat to start with, a level 2 Anarchy, just because it allows you to steal from the guards without them detecting you. You can steal from them without knocking them down. That means you're not going to advance the alarm tracker and you're not going to alert them once they wake up. So it's generally a good way to play the game. The game encourages you to play a very stealth game. You want to be very slow and methodical, but you still want to be very sneaky and just get through the maps, get through each facility, each mission, without really causing too much chaos. It's generally not encouraged for you to cause a lot of chaos on the map. And Anarchy, despite the name, it's kind of ironic, is the stat that allows you to go through the map with a lot more grace, you could call it, just being more stealth than if you just brute force it with, let's say, another agent like Shalem. So that's one of Banks's strongest points, the starting 2 Anarchy. Now let's talk about her items and augments, starting with the on-file version. The on-file version of Banks starts with Crypto Computer. This augment is one of the best augments in the game, and I will explain why. Opening security doors without a pass card is extremely useful because, first of all, pass cards take up an inventory slot. So if you have Banks on your team, you're automatically saving an inventory slot on just wasting that inventory slot just so you can open up the red doors. With Banks, she opens up the red doors regardless. And if you have a lock decoders take time, whereas Crypto Computer is instant. You just instantly open up the door if you have Banks on your team. That means that areas of the map that are normally difficult to get to are more accessible to you. So that means that you could, I'm not saying that you could access different parts of the map more easily instead of circling around. Like maybe one of the rooms has a couple guards inside, maybe 2 or 3 cameras inside, and you generally don't want to go into that room unless you really have to. Banks could get you around that if there's a red door, a locked door around the vicinity, and you can just bypass that entirely. Go through it when you actually want to, but because you can avoid it, because you can just go through really like full-on stealth, this is generally a really good thing because it's just the way that you should be playing the game, a really stealth game, and Banks enables you to do that. So her augment, combined with her 2 Anarchy, means that she's a very strong stealth agent. She's a very strong agent with a lot of utility for your team, and she allows you to maintain that stealth playstyle. That's one of the main reasons why she's so powerful as an agent. Why she's, I would consider, probably top 3 best agents in the game. So let's look at her other items. She starts off with a Neural Disruptor. Nothing really to see here. This is just the same thing that everyone else starts with, basically. The third item that she has is the Custom Paralyzer. Custom Paralyzer is a pretty nice item. It's basically a Paralyzer 2, even though it's something that's a lot easier to use. These custom items that a lot of the characters start with, they're generally easier to use. They require less stats to use, and the custom paralyzer is just like that. You just need the anarchy to use it, and she starts with that, so she can automatically use this. And this also helps with the stealth playstyle. If you knock down the enemy guard, you can use the Paralyzer on them to keep them pinned for an additional 3 turns. And that's really useful because in the early stages of the game, you generally finish the maps within, let's say, 10 turns. If you can keep a guard down for 3 turns, that's basically like a third of the map is them just being on the ground. And that's really useful. So Banks in the early game, this is one of the reasons why she's so strong. In the mid game, she can still use this item extremely well. This paralyzers in general are just really good for just the stealth playstyle. If you do have to knock somebody out, like there's a stationary guard in your way and you have to take him out, then the paralyzer will make sure that they don't disrupt your the rest of your playthrough on the mission, the rest of your mission, and they're basically just going to be out of the picture for a very long time. Now, this is especially useful if you're playing the game on -1 KO multiplier. If your Neural Disruptor only KOs for 1 turn, it's one of the settings you can choose in the custom settings just to make the game really, really difficult. When I play on that difficulty, it's pretty annoying to play on that difficulty. And well, if you have a paralyzer to help extend that KO time, it makes the game so much easier. So another reason why Banks is just such a great agent to start with, because if you're on these really high difficulties, you're going to run into really difficult rooms. You're going to run into pretty annoying layouts. She can help you bypass these layouts. You're going to run into annoying stationary guards or just guards you can't avoid. Or you can just, if a guard is in the way and you just really want to take him out, you can keep him on the ground for a longer period of time without having to pin him by using the Paralyzer. This is what Banks is used for. This is why Banks is strong. And overall, no matter what kind of difficulty you play on, the most extreme difficulties, the really easy difficulties, Banks will still be very beneficial with all of her items, her augments, and just everything combined. So let's talk about her archive version now. The archive version, it's not as good as the on-file version, I would say. But if you're playing the game on 0.5 times credit multiplier, the archive version is invaluable. This is such a powerful agent to use if you want credits. So the item I'm talking about is Banks' custom econ chip. It's an econ chip that functions the same way except the cooldown is lower, which means you can use it more often on the consoles to get more money. So that means overall, when you're clearing the missions, you're going to end up having more money, and the credit multiplier does not apply to the econ chip, which means that even though you're only receiving like 40 credits when you steal, 60 credits when you rob a safe, you're still getting 50 credits per power when you're using the econ chip. That doesn't change. This is a consistent value no matter what settings you have, which means that this is even more powerful the lower your credit multiplier gets, just because it's consistent. It's a normalized value. So that's one of the reasons why Banks, the archive version, is so powerful on these higher end difficulties. Now the problem is that she has no starting augment. And if you have an agent with no starting augment, it basically means that after you start getting more items, after you start scaling into the mid to late game where you actually have to tackle really difficult places, you're not really going to have a lot of unique augments that can be really beneficial. Like Dr. Shu is one of the great examples of having an augment that is really beneficial throughout the entire game no matter what, because his augment is unique. There's also Nika. Nika's augment is just incredibly strong as a combat unit. Thing is, Banks doesn't have that. And the archive version doesn't have crypto computer, obviously, so you're not going to have that quick access through the map like you would if you use the on-file version of Banks. You're just going to have a nanofab agent, basically, with this version of Banks. And I guess that is her weakness, and that's why I said earlier that she doesn't really work that well in the late game. So if you're on endless difficulties, then after day 5 to 7, you're going to see her kind of start to fall off. And she's just going to be relegated to being a nanofab agent that focuses more on utility generally. But you do have the option to make her a combat agent. I would recommend against that, just because she starts with Anarchy, and in general, when you have an agent who starts with certain stats, you want to try and build them towards that stat, because it's easier for them to level that up. It means that she can make use of shock traps more easily, just because it's cheaper to level up her Anarchy compared to anyone else who starts, let's say Nika. Nika starts with one anarchy, so automatically you're saving money on leveling her up because you have two anarchy. And once you get to the Shock Trap 3 level, which is 4 anarchy, you're going to be breezing through maps really easily because Shock Trap 3 is probably the most broken item in the game. And Banks uh, can access it quicker than a lot of other agents. So I guess that could be one of her strengths you could look at. But in general, she's just not very good. So our other item is the Neural Dart. This is just a default no armor piercing ranged weapon with ammo. The good thing about this is that it's not a lethal weapon. Lethal weapons are generally discouraged because there's a cleanup cost. Killing people will produce a cleanup cost of at least 60 credits after you clear the map, so you generally don't want to lose credits, especially when you have um, lower lower credit multipliers. You don't want to be penalized. But the thing is, with banks, you still make a lot of money, so I guess it does cancel it out. It's still, I would say, it's still not a very good play style in general to kill people because it advances the alarm level really quickly, and you kind of break away from that stealth play style, which the game generally encourages. So the Neural Dart is an item that you can find in the nanofab. Another reason why Banks is generally just this nanofab agent. And the only thing that makes her strong, the archive version really strong, is the custom econ chip. It's just a better version of the econ chip. And basically that's it. So in most cases, I would recommend you use the on-file version of Banks, unless you really need the money. The on-file version of Banks is just overall really good. It makes her extremely good in security dispatch missions. The security dispatch missions, they have the locked door behind the lasers, the one that requires the key card to open the red door. So with crypto computer, you can access that without stealing a key card from the guards. You can just ignore that phase entirely. You don't have to search for the guard who has the key card. You can just use Banks, and that's just another reason why Banks is so good. And I highly recommend you use Banks. But the thing is, as a starting agent, you may not want to choose Banks. There are other starting agents that have better augments or just are better in the early game. Banks is really nice, but she's also nice when you get her from detention centers. When you get her from a detention center, she's incredibly good still. She still has her crypto computer. She doesn't have her paralyzer, but you can level up her anarchy. You can buy better paralyzers later on. Once you start accessing the nanofab missions, you're gonna have access to Paralyzer 3 if you want to use it, and she's obviously gonna start with her two anarchies. So these innate traits to Banks, they're not gonna change. They're still gonna be there, and she's still gonna be really strong, regardless of whether you start with her, whether you find her in a detention center. Banks will be Banks, and Banks still will be one of the best agents in the game. So overall, who is she good with? Who does she work well with? As always, Decker. Decker works well with every agent, so I'm just going to say this in each of these episodes. If you want an agent who's really strong in the early game, who can carry your other agents, Decker is just the easiest agent to use and the best agent to use. But the other agents that Banks does pretty well with, you generally don't want to put her with agents that have anarchy. So you don't really want to put her with Central. You don't want to put her with Prism, just because they don't really have that much synergy. She's already going to be pretty good at being this utility character who can steal, who can access areas that are normally not accessible, and just to be this disruptive character if you really need her to be disruptive with her Paralyzer. So in general, I think it's a good idea to put her with agents that specialize in combat. Nika is pretty good, although Nika does have some power issues if you don't pair her with an agent that can generate power. Um, and Dr. Shu is also really good. Dr. Shu can function as this utility agent, but he's pretty good in combat as well. So just pairing them up, Banks can take the lead, and Dr. Shu can provide cover for her and help her out with his shock trap, with the neural disruptor. Just overall, basically every agent can work pretty well with Banks, just because she's such a good agent. Banks is the enabler. Think of it that way. She enables your team to succeed, and that's what you should think of her as. She's just an overall great agent. Like I said, top 3 agents in the game probably, and she is just this overall really good utility agent, especially with the anarchy. Especially because you just need to pay a smaller amount. You can pay a smaller amount to level up her anarchy compared to other agents who don't start with 2 anarchy, and you can reach that point where she just spams these shock traps on every single door, and she becomes ridiculously powerful as this kind of backline or like follow up agent who just covers your trail with these shock traps and continuously creates areas that you can access. You can get around guards, and then if they do try and chase you, they just walk into these shock traps. That's generally the playstyle that I use for her. Um, so once you reach that point, it's pretty easy to just play her like that. It's once you reach the point where she's really powerful, she can provide that cover for your team, provide that utility for your team. She's just incredibly good. But until then, she's still really good. Still a respectable agent because of Crypto Computer. Crypto Computer is probably one of the best augments in the game, just because it gives you access, and accessibility is generally one of the best things in the game because it allows you to have more options to move around, and having more options to move around, especially in stealth, is encouraged in this game. So that's the overview for Banks, and that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back for next episode when we talk about another agent. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.